America is an amazing country filled with wonderful people who do incredible things. But too often, the media and liberal politicians ignore big parts of our nation and the people who make it work. So I'm speaking with leaders and policymakers who deal with real problems every day. I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is Real America. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Mehmet Oz, the host of the Emmy Award-winning The Dr. Oz Show and the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. We're going to cover everything from his television career, what motivated him to enter politics, and his U.S. Senate race in Pennsylvania. So I am so excited to have you on my show, Dr. Oz. Welcome to Real America, our nominee from the great state of Pennsylvania.
Well, thank you for having me, but even more so, I want to brag about you to everybody.
Okay.
Because when you're running in a primary, even if people aren't endorsing you, if they just call and say, are you alive? Are you harming yourself? Are there people in your life that still love you? It means a lot, and you would do that continually. And I think it's one of the reasons you're a wonderful RNC leader is that you actually care about the candidates.
Oh, thank you.
And so stepping up and creating that emotional connection was invaluable, so God bless you.
Thank you, and congratulations on getting out of a very competitive primary in a must-win state that we're going to talk a little bit more about your election. But I want to get to know you a little bit more for our listeners and our viewers. So your parents came here from Turkey and they got involved in the medical field, which you followed their footsteps in. Talk about your upbringing and how you ended up being a cardiac surgeon.
My father and mother lived the American dream. My dad had been trained in Turkey towards the tail end of the Second World War. Remember, there were German and Austrian and Eastern European Jewish physicians who had fled the continent to Istanbul, where my dad was trained.
Okay.
Educated all on scholarship, by the way, my father. So he got exposed to the best medicine on the planet, trained, and was recruited to come to this country because we did not have enough physicians in the 50s. And when he arrived here, he realized that that shining city on the hill was alive. It truly was the American dream come alive. And so he began to prosper, was welcomed into the community. We settled just south of Philadelphia, a place named near Kennett Square. It's the mushroom capital of the world.
Oh, I would not have known that.
But what he would recognize is his advice, which is don't be a mushroom when you grow up. Right? Don't sit in the dark all day long, get fed manure, and then get canned at the end of it all. And I got outside the shed for that reason. I spent most of my life, and I still am, outside looking in, which is not so much because I want to disrupt what's going on inside the shed, but I do see opportunities sometimes present that you would otherwise not be aware of. And so as I began to mature, I went to medical school at Penn. I became president of the student body eventually. One of the things I did was to make sure we had a nutrition class. Now you may say, why does that matter if you have nutrition in medical school? Well, if I don't know anything about, for example, prevention, I can't teach it to you, my patient. So we were getting physicians to know all the science, but none of the wisdom you would normally have had as a physician of years past to educate patients and allow them to play an active role. Remember, the word doctor comes from the Latin doctore, teacher.
Okay.
I'm supposed to educate my patients.
That makes so much, but you had to have been way ahead to talk about nutrition, right?
I was way ahead, and because of that, I got a lot of heat, which is what happens when you're sometimes, pushing people to go.
When you're a trailblazer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in a similar opposite, and that's a low-tech opportunity. There's the high-tech side was I invented devices to be able to repair heart valves. I'm a heart surgeon, so I normally open the chest with a bandsaw, expose your valve, stop your heart, and then change the valve or fix it. Well, I realized I could actually repair the valve with catheters without doing any of that.
And you invented some of those devices?
I invented the clip that we use for the mitral valve, which, for example, reduces the chance of dying from heart failure if you have that problem by a half, and it costs half as much as conventional therapy. That sounds like a good thing, doesn't it?
It sounds like a great thing. And plus, the recovery time has to be much better for the patient.
That's why we do it, because people are already sick with heart failure. And so they not only do they survive, but they survive quickly, as opposed to languishing in the ICU for weeks trying to recover. It still took 15 years plus to get it through different regulatory apparatuses of the U.S. government. And again, innovation is stifled when you have rules, especially when they're made by middle-level unelected bureaucrats who don't understand the deep realities of trying to prosper as an entrepreneur in America. Again, as an outsider, it wasn't welcome because it's so different, but it worked. Eventually, I began to realize that the single most important thing I needed to do in my personal life as a physician, was to educate the people around me. Because if I could get them to become my partners, if I could get them to become world experts in their bodies, they would prosper. And it makes my job as a heart surgeon much easier. So over time, I began doing that on television more and more and more, and eventually culminated in the Dr. Oz show, which for 13 years was a top show on health in the world.
Well, trust me, I know that because I think every woman and mom, I was a stay-home mom, was watching Dr. Oz at some point. So I watched many of your shows, but I think that is really interesting. Your background, that you were into nutrition, that you were helping your patients not have to come to see you in the first place, and then you took this passion to get on TV. What was that like, leaving cardiac surgery and then going to TV? It had to have been a huge transition.
Well, the beauty of my life was I could still do heart surgery.
Okay.
And so I would keep operating one day a week. I would do the television show the other days. We do tape shows, so like most television in syndication, you tape your shows and you can air them on days that you can't do it yourself. So I would preserve Thursday as my operating day. I go see patients. I teach the residents that day. I do my procedures. And I always believed that when I looked into the eyes of my patients, when you do that, you have an incredible bond because you're there for them and they have to trust you.
Yes.
And you use that ability to get their trust to also get them to trust themselves, which is sort of what you do in politics. And that's why I've always felt that I was a Republican, a conservative, because I knew that ultimately it was individualism that would prosper. If I could get you to trust yourself, trust your ability to make decisions, to be an entrepreneur, to take risks, but also push back on government overreach. These are all things that are very valuable for the health of society. It's exactly what you do for people's personal health. When I started doing the show, I could talk to a lot more people.
Yeah.
I mean, millions and millions of people a day about topics that would help them in their own discussions with their doctors. And for many Americans, I became their doctor.
You did. How many times did you like walk down the street where someone would come ask you a medical question? Does that still happen every once in a while?
It
Just
happened
all the time?
It happened
I'm sure
today.
I'm going to have a couple today after the show.
It happened today. But that's actually a turning point because when you go from being anonymous in the world to being recognized, several things happen. One, you have to decide how you're going to react. And I was always honored when someone would ask me a question, because I know I tortured my teachers to learn all this stuff. I wanted to pass it on down. But I also realized that they were trying to empower themselves. Isn't that my job as a doctor, a teacher, to get you to realize that you can do this without having to bother anybody else? And it actually makes you feel you have agency over your future. And I think part of the reason that the radical left has lost a lot of America is they don't appreciate that that's what brings us joy. Being responsible for each other, because it's the safety net of humanity are each other, right? That's what supports us. Having responsibility to each other gives you a purpose, gives you a mission, and gives you joy for that reason. Which is why if you don't have an agenda for prosperity, and I really do believe the radical left has lost that in many ways, then you're not going anywhere. You become listless. And then a deeper malaise starts to attack people. And the anxiety that America has felt is one of the compelling reasons I decided to leave television, which is a pretty safe place. When you're on the stage, you had
like a #1 show and everybody loves you. And so what were you thinking going into politics in this divisive, crazy time? I mean, how did you make that decision?
Well, I made it with my family,
okay,
which I would encourage anyone who's considering running to ensure they're on board.
100%.
They pay a big price. You get some accolades. They just get the criticism. For me, the turning point was COVID.
Okay.
And it wasn't just because we mismanaged it so badly, but because I realized we were mixing science and politics. And when you mix science and politics, you get politics.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw it when we witnessed a perversion of the data. You either couldn't study certain things like medications that were used in other parts of the world successfully, and whether they worked here or not, that's not the issue. We should study these issues.
But they were being politicized.
Politicized, badmouth. I saw for the first time media rooting against solutions to a deadly illness.
Even the origins of it. They wouldn't even look at that.
Because they hated the people talking about it. And I kept thinking, well, at least science will prevail. And it turns out it couldn't. Because when you politicize the people reviewing the manuscripts, you politicize the people writing the articles in science, well, you don't get the truth out anymore. And it's not just in medicine. As I saw it happen in COVID, and I have a lot of experience, obviously, in that area. Mm-hmm. So I think I had domain expertise. I could see the lies as they occurred. I could see the perversion of truth and the underpinnings of medicine being rotted away as it occurred. But I also saw it happening with energy policy. Yeah. When I saw a Green New Deal offered, that it is intellectually dishonest, not based on science. It cannot happen in a timeline articulated. I see the same thing happening in our schools where there's a defense made of teaching children about complicated topics under the guise that it's better for them. And if you actually look at the data, it's just not true.
No.
And yet I saw the radical left crutching on what they argued was infallible science defending what they were doing. So we should shut up and be quiet and mind our own business and just take our pills and be chattel. And I said, no, if you're not going to be honest about why you're saying what you're doing, and you've actually turned ideology into science with your actions, we have to defend ourselves. Because if you don't have people who understand science involved in defending science, it gets rotted away like every other truth we have in American society.
And you're a credible voice that people trust doing this, but you took a huge risk. I think it's a huge risk to be a known TV personality in that world and come into politics as a Republican, because of course if you were a Democrat, they'd love you. But as a Republican, how has it been? How has it been for you running for Senate and taking that change? Are you enjoying it? I mean, has it just been?
I love the campaign. I love every single day. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because you run into patriots. People did not have to take a risk to step up and be counted and support you. And they do it over and over again. I mean, it never ceases to surprise me. And these are days that try men's souls, as Thomas Paine wrote. And there are sunshine patriots out there, some soldiers who don't actually step up. But the majority of Americans care deeply about this country. So yes, I have friends in media who are not happy that I went into politics, and some of them have said harsh things to me. It's okay. It says more about them than me. The majority are intimidated by the idea of getting involved, even though I know they actually personally believe what I'm saying.
What you believe,
because I work with them.
They know.
These are people I've come into contact with at the highest levels. I know that deep down they recognize the dangers of not speaking what they know to be the case. But it would destroy them. Absolutely destroy their ability to make a living. And I don't want to hurt people who are just trying to get through their day. But what I often see on the campaign trail, and I love doing these big events, and traveling all over the corners of this beautiful Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But I'll say, I'll put it. I tell stories. I try to, and this is a story of why I believe this is a passion. I played football in college, and at the end of the national anthem, you're about to run out in the field. So you wait till the last word, and the last word is not free. It's not win. It's not beautiful. All those are true about America. The last words are home of the brave.
Yep.
And the reason for that is you can't be free if you're not brave. And so I ask audiences, Democrats, independents, Republicans, because I'm reaching across the aisle to every corner of the Commonwealth. I'm asking you to be brave enough to say what you see. Do what Americans have always been able to do. Articulate what you know deep in your heart to be important. Let someone else try to correct you or agree with you. But if we lose that ability, then we've devolved into what I know rotted away a bunch of communist countries around the planet. It's why communism and socialism doesn't work, because you're lying. The person talking to you knows you're lying. You know that they know that you're lying. There's no truth anymore. And too often in the conversations we're having around really important stuff, we say we want to talk about it, we don't really talk about it. And in politics, you have the freedom to say exactly what you see, because you won't win if you don't.
And you do have to talk about it. I think the thing that is so disheartening for me as a Republican, I think you just hit on it a little bit, is there's this absolutism in the media. And we saw it with COVID. I think it's, absolutely what the Democrats are saying is right. Follow the science. Let's get the kids out of school. Let's mask them up. We know now there were mental health ramifications, certainly education deficits and things that kids are dealing with. And we also know that the science wasn't exact because it was a new virus, but this absolutism and this refusal to have a conversation. And what I love about you is you're coming in with a credible background. You've been in media, you've been a doctor, you're educated, but you're somebody who's going to open up a conversation and be willing to listen to other sides and help bring people together. And I think that's part of your mission. Is that what the people of Pennsylvania are looking for as you're traveling the state?
100%. And on the show, I did that as my day job.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was to bring people from different backgrounds onto the program, hear their views, try to course correct, or give them the freedom to tell stories about why they believe what they believe, so that everyone in America and around the world, my show was in 100 countries, could witness it. And I didn't always have the person on that I agreed with. Frequently, that was the whole point. Get people on you don't agree with so that you can actually learn something. What Pennsylvania wants are for people to come into elected office and fix the major issues that are challenging them. And these are not fringe issues. These are the fundamentals we know right now in America are dominating us, right? The cost of living, grocery prices, energy and gas prices, the fact that they don't feel that parents especially have a voice in the choice of their schools or what's being taught in their schools. There's frustration about the fact that the covenant we have with our government is fractured. I obey the law. I do my job as a citizen. You protect my borders.
Exactly.
You secure what a nation.
Make sure drugs aren't coming across and killing my kids.
And under the guise of caring, and I think Democrats care about caring deeply, but I care about fixing. As a surgeon, I don't want to come out there and say, yes, I really cared a lot for your loved one. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Wouldn't you rather hear, I care so much about him, I made a couple of really big moves, and I think going to be happy with them, but let me explain. That's a better way to come out.
And they're going to live.
And they're going to live. And the border is a good example of that. The Democrats think they're humanitarian saviors there. You've created a humanitarian crisis if you support an open border, because you're basically pouring money into the coffers of cartels who are trafficking human beings under horrible conditions. And with the profits that they make, they go buy narcotics from China, traffic the narcotics with the people they're smuggling in. We had over 100,000 deaths last year in America from opiates alone, fentanyl. That's 4 times more than died of COVID. And these are the opportunities we have as Republicans to win arguments, but we have to get the word out.
You have to be brave to do it.
To be brave to do it, you have to have enough money to tell the story, which is why what you do is so critical. You have to have a team that already has feet on the ground, like you are when you build centers. You built a center in North Philadelphia. I did my first event in Philadelphia there last week. It's unbelievably effective, packed.
I know. Yeah. I know you went to that office.
And people want to hear. They actually, they don't believe what the media is telling them. And the media, just because of the nature of media, and I was in it, so I understand it, they're not going to tell our story for us. It's not their job to tell our story for us, right? And in particular because of the polarization these days, and most people in media are not. The old-fashioned media person was a guy who grew up in a lower middle class, worked hard, working class family, had a sensibility about that. Today's media participants are college-educated, often elitists, who have a very different perspective of what it's like to roll your sleeves up and do a difficult job. It actually puts us at a great advantage as Republicans that most of us have been involved in the private sector. We've been entrepreneurs. We've worked hard. We've signed the front of a check, right? Made payroll, had to make decisions about hiring and firing. These are the realities of running a business. They're also the realities of having a family, right? Taking the steps on decisions that need to be made by everybody. Honey, get out of the house, no more video games. Here are the rules. You don't get to make the choice yet. These are uncomfortable, from points for a lot of people, but they're the ones we need to make. And Republicans we have to be bold making these statements. Because if we're hesitant, then we cede the moral high ground, which is an arid and desolate place anyway, but we cede it to people who shouldn't be on the moral high ground. And then we're portrayed as uncaring. And in Pennsylvania, the most important thing I want to make sure people know is I'm a doctor. I'm a healer first. I know with a dose of reality, we can address a lot of the challenges. I'm incredibly optimistic because you travel around Pennsylvania and you see the shining light in their eyes. Right? It's illuminating not just the cities, but the rural areas. But it's true, I'm sure across America. I bet every Senate candidate feels the same way. Every candidate does. As you meet people, you get optimistic. And I was up in Erie, which is just a bucolic.
Beautiful. I've been in Erie. It's gorgeous.
So I was in a little diner up there that a young woman had just purchased.
Okay.
And she's trying to make it, trying to get the store up and running, the diner. So I said, very proudly, I'm going to hopefully be your next U.S. Senator. I'm campaigning hard for it. I want to get your vote. When I'm in the U.S. Senate, what can I do for you? And she looked at me very drolly, poured my coffee and said, get out of my way.
Really?
Because she doesn't want government in her hair. She knows how to do this business. She's an entrepreneur. The state had just come in there that month, began auditing her tipping practices. The people working with her are her partners. There's no tipping. There's no money. Every penny goes back into the business. In a similar encounter, I was with a farmer this past week, and he's an entrepreneur, and he's got some apple orchards, and he wants the kids to come and pick the apples. It's more fun for the families. It brings customers in. So he gets his trailer, puts a wagon on the back, and was taking the kids on this very short 100-yard dirt road up to the apple orchard. The state came by.
No.
He's at an amusement park now. Now that he's a tractor and a wagon, it's an amusement park, which is hundreds of dollars of fees.
The regulations.
And pages and pages of paperwork. He stopped.
Really?
Yeah. And so this is
sad.
It is. You did not hire the person who made that rule.
I love that she said that. Get the government out of my way. Let us live our American dream. Find a way to get that balance. Same with COVID. All of this that you're saying. Same with that device that you created. That took too long maybe to save lives. Let's talk about your state. You have an energy state. Joe Biden, I remember when he kept coming to Pennsylvania over and over again, he would never be honest about how he felt about oil and gas because he wanted to cater to the state. We now know it's on full display. He is happy that gas is $5 a gallon. It's intentional. He's not tapping American energy. How important is energy to the workers and the people of Pennsylvania?
It's the number one issue, without question.
Okay.
And the reason it's number one is not just because of the gas prices. It's because people working in the communities where gas, oil, energy is taken out of the ground are being destroyed by these policies. And they know they have the answer right beneath their feet. And yet we're not allowing those folks to do what they want to do. Make a living, takes energy cleanly out of the ground, and natural gas is a very clean source of energy.
Absolutely.
A dominant opportunity where the Pennsylvania could supply the entire country for hundreds of years. And I'll give you a stat that sort of shows this. And again, that woman in the diner and every other person I could run into, frankly, knows this data. They can sit next to you and lecture you on energy policy. If I took the natural gas under our feet in Pennsylvania and could ship it overseas to countries and replace whatever they're doing for their energy, it would be the equivalent for 30 years in a row of electrifying every vehicle in America, plus putting a solar panel on every residential house in America, plus doubling wind energy. Now, those are all the renewable sources of energy. I would be providing more of that than we're ever going to get, and yet I'd be doing that every year for 30 years if you just let us use our natural gas. But the hypocrisy of saying, and this is what the far left, radical left is saying, that we've given you plenty of opportunities when you know they're lying and you know they know they're lying. So now not only are you compromising your communities, you're hurting the standard of living. Obviously, inflation is primarily driven these days by gas prices. But you're also compromising our national security and weakening us with our allies and our enemies overseas. And the folks in Pennsylvania are going to vote on this issue. My challenge is to make sure that it's not just well appreciated in the red part of the state, which I will do very well in. But there are parts of the state, and particularly the Southeast, where Philadelphia and the suburbs are, that's where I live, where people are beginning to understand it, but they're not sure because they've been forced to believe the Green New Deal is the only way forward. And they don't understand that it's a dishonest narrative. So that's where I spend most of my effort. In the advertisements I buy, it's to make sure they know I care about them, that I'll do whatever it takes as a doctor to make sure they do well. And here are a couple examples. Energy becomes the number one example. And I layer that with, schools and
But again, it goes back to what you said, the dishonesty on COVID, the dishonesty on other issues that we see from the media. And then there's been a lot of dishonesty too, because you talk about clean energy, right? Well, we have so many safeguards in our country. We produce clean energy. And instead of tapping American resources, we're going to go to Russia. We're going to go to Venezuela. Are they really clean air or clean energy producers? Of course not. They're not putting the safeguards in place. So we're limiting our economy while aiding economies that don't have a vision. Russia invades Ukraine. I mean, it is so counterintuitive. But when you have a conversation with a voter like you're doing and you talk about it, they get it. But the media doesn't share that aspect of the story. And certainly Joe Biden is dishonest.
What the stories being shared now, which is infuriating, is that the energy prices are all a result of corporate greed. That's class warfare, Rana. That's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because you're arguing that people that you have knowingly hurt, who have been begging you for an audience to just hear their side of the story so you could actually free them to do what they want to do. Because when you talk to these guys, they know exactly what has to happen for them.
And it's not just the owners, it's the workers.
Of course it is.
It's
and yet
everybody.
You're telling voters, because it's all political, that these horrible human beings are, and you vilify the entire sector, the energy sector, these horrible human beings are jacking up prices to take advantage, to price gouge. And this is coming up now on the campaign trail. And of course I defend what my beliefs, but I start to wonder, well, I would never vilify an entire sector.
No.
Right? I would be critical of teachers' unions, but I would never vilify teachers.
Teachers,
They're doing their best. I know how hard that job is. Same for law enforcement. There might be, problems here and there, but to put yourself at risk like that, I was up doing a town hall in the western part of the state, and a woman got up and started to get very emotional about the fact that her son was a cop. And I said, well, thank you for him putting his life at risk, and I appreciate the fear you have. She said, I'm not fearful of my son. I'm proud that he's a police officer. I'm upset that he's not being respected for risking his life to help his fellow man. And when you actually demoralize a force, which is what's happened, for example, in Philadelphia, where the police know that the The DA, who's a Soros-funded individual, will not enforce the law, will not take criminals they've arrested numerous times and put them behind bars, will not even prosecute them. The public defenders are complaining that the same perpetrators are coming up every single week, and the public defenders don't want to defend them anymore because they're guilty. And yet the prosecutors don't come prepared.
Yeah.
Because the whole DA office is sort of throwing their hands up.
Well, this segues perfectly into your opponent. Okay, so your Democrat opponent is to the left of Bernie Sanders. I mean, you think of Bernie Sanders as socialist, communist, whatever he can do, defund the police, radical, extreme Democrat, and your opponent is further left. But he also is very, very much for this defund the police, cashless bail, which isn't just defund, it's demoralize, demean, diminish our police, which hurts the safety of our communities, certainly in cities like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, which are in your great state. Are the voters aware of how dangerous he would be if he came in, and looking at the homicide rates and the increasing crime around the country from these Soros-funded DAs, this is what your opponent wants for your state?
They don't know anything about him except that he likes marijuana.
You know that. He does love marijuana.
No, this is the survey data that we have. It's shocking. He's never really had a competitive race. He's never worked in the private sector. So he doesn't understand the machinery of America and how it works, but he's also never really been involved in a process that had meaning. He was he ran as a mayor in a small town in Western Pennsylvania, then ran as lieutenant governor, which does not a job where you have a lot of responsibility.
No.
But one of those responsibilities is you're on the parole board. He wants to release one third of all the prisoners in Pennsylvania, some of them violent offenders. He doesn't believe in life sentences for murderers. He has positions that I think as the electorate hears about them, especially in a city like Philadelphia where we have so much crime, is going to be problematic. And as you sort of look around at the opportunities to make a difference, and I tell this to a lot of folks that many paying attention now should hear this. If you put someone like that into the Senate, he's not just to the far left of Bernie Sanders, but he's vocal about desiring to just disrupt and blow up. He's just not happy with how America is. And the positions he'll take, and he's a younger gentleman, he's 52 years old, in the early 50s, could lead to years and years of problems for us in the Senate. And Pennsylvania, throughout my life, has had at least one Republican senator. We're a purple state in every way possible, and we're a microcosm of the country. We will win because when I'm done defining my opponent with your help and the help of many watching now, people in Pennsylvania know about him, and he's going to run attack ads on me. So I know that as we get towards the end, it's going to come down to conservative Democrats and independents who are not happy with the current course of the country.
I think he is one of the more frightening candidates running on the Democrat side. I look at Gascon in LA, the prosecutor there who's done terrible things, allowed violent criminals to get on the street, hurt families. And I think crime is such a big issue in Pennsylvania. I think he would absolutely hurt the safety and the security of your citizens, on top of energy, on top of the prosperity you want to see for your great Commonwealth. I hope everyone gets out and votes for Mehmet Oz, that they do everything they can. This is a must-hold, save our country's seat that we have to win, and you are the right candidate to do it. How do people donate and support you for your all-too-critical race?
DrOz.com is the website. We have some of the biggest social followings out there as well. So we're on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat. Go everywhere that you'd like to spend time to listen to this stuff. We make high quality content that educates and elevates. I'm about building solutions, and I will make sure that happens in Pennsylvania. And God bless you for your support. What you do, and I should plug for the RNC, for candidates, especially first-time candidates like me who don't know the ropes, when you lay out the street lights for that serpentine path towards victory, it helps.
You speak so well. I no wonder you were on TV. I mean, your brain, it's pretty amazing. I'm a little intimidated, I'm not going to lie, but I think you're going to serve us so well in the Senate. And I just have loved getting to know you. Thank you for being brave and taking this risk, and being brave for the many, many Americans who are looking for somebody to fight for them and somebody to give them a voice in Washington. So thank you for doing that. Everyone go support Mehmet Oz. We need to win the Senate seat, and let's take back the Senate in 2022.
God bless you.
Thank you.
I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is what Republicans stand for. Join us next time on Real America.